The Moore Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines. Available for download on all major digital platforms.
If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The Moore Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.
The Moore Show is in partnership with Ozark Mountain Publishing, taking readers beyond the unexplained. The comments and views expressed on The Moore Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The Moore Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world on TV, radio and online. I bid you all good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be, in all the world's time zones. This is The Moore Show, and I'm your host, Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm joined with Henry Michaelson. Now, Henry has early childhood memories of knowing something was going to happen before it did. Unknown to him, he was having early manifestations of precognition and clairvoyance. He never shared these experiences with anyone and grew up with a secret that no one knew. During his formal education, he searched religion, philosophy, theology, psychology, and metaphysics for explanations of these experiences. None of these sources provided the answers and insight he sought. When Henry was 32, he met someone who understood him. He trusted her with his secret, and she helped him understand his experiences and taught him methodologies to develop and expand his abilities. Henry holds a Bachelor's of Science in Sociology and a Master's in Theology. He retired from his career in logistics and technology, and he now lives with his wife in the southern United States. Henry Michaelson, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Now, your book, And Jesus Said, how did you come to write this book?
It was a result of some of my experiences during meditation. I have been meditating since 1976. And at some point during those daily meditations, I had the experience of other entities appearing to me. They didn't take the form of a human body that you and I would experience visually. They were more nebulous forms, perhaps because it's so esoteric, it's a bit challenging to describe, but there were these groups of entities that had a type of identity that I could recognize, but it was not a visual identity. It was more of a energetic identity, I suppose. But I became accustomed to sometimes those entities would be present in my meditations, and many times they would not. What did they do in the meditations? Many times they were just there, sort of doing the same thing that I was doing. They weren't interacting with me. They were just present.
Right. So you've always had psychic abilities in a sense, then?
To some level. I will leave it to someone else to determine what level of psychic abilities and that sort of thing. But certainly I had some. I've had them since I was a very young child, I certainly was not aware that I had them. I didn't have any background or nomenclature to describe them. It was in my more in my adult life when I began to read and broaden my exposure to psychic material and paranormal material that I began to have the understanding that some of the things I was reading about I had actually experienced. But eventually, an entity appeared in my meditations. Back to your question, how did the book begin? An entity appeared in my meditations that was experientially to me different from any of the other entities that I was accustomed to. And I didn't think anything of it. This entity just sort of visited with the rest of us. Because of its newness, eventually I asked the entity its name, and it declared that it was in its last incarnation, it lived the life of Jesus of Nazareth. Eventually, I came around to the practical question that would sound something like, well, why are you here? And Jesus said, I would like for you to channel a book if you're willing to do that. And I gave it some consideration over several weeks and eventually, obviously, said yes. And that's sort of how the book began.
So why you, do you think? I mean, what's your connection? Have you ever looked into that part of it as well?
I haven't. My first thought was it must have been a very slow day in the universe, and everybody else was really busy with other important matters. And I was the kind of the last resort. But I really don't know why I was selected. It's an interesting question that I've never, in my interactions with Jesus, asked why me. I was more kind of to the point. He's asked if I would do this. I'll give it consideration. I need to say yes or no. And oddly enough, I don't think I've ever considered why me.
Okay. Now, obviously, there's quite a bit to get through in this interview, and let's go straight to it. Why did Jesus incarnate at that period to do what he did in the end?
According to what he communicated in the book, he incarnated to be, first of all, for his own development. He is just like us, and we are just like him in the sense that we're all spirits with the same connectivity to the entity Jesus refers to as the source, which I'm quite comfortable, as is he, in translating to God. But we're all in this process of development. So his first reason for incarnating as Jesus was for his own development. Then part of that development was to be of service to others, and another part to teach others. So he was coming for his own spiritual development as well as to teach others and serve others in that process.
Now, this must have been a sort of highly evolved soul, in a sense, because this was to be his last life. I mean, he's not reincarnated back, as far as from what I gather in the book.
That's my understanding as well, that he has not reincarnated.
It's such a fascinating subject, this is, and I want to do it justice as much as I can do. Did Jesus want a religion after his name, do you think, from what you've gathered?
From my interaction with him, he did not. That was not his purpose at all. He didn't, in the classical Christian sense, he didn't come to be the Savior of the world. He didn't die to save mankind from its sins. He is not going to return again in a second coming to, as it were, separate the good from the bad and take the people that believed in him and go to some grand celestial place for the rest of existence. None of that was his purpose. None of that was anything that he intended.
Not even as a sort of sole plan before he came here. I mean, it must have been a possibility that for him to incarnate in that life, this could have been a byproduct of it, surely.
Interesting thought. I guess if you consider probabilities, and is it possible that could have been a byproduct? I suspect, again, that's a possibility. But from my interaction with Jesus, that was not his purpose at all. It may have been confusing. It was certainly somewhat confusing to the Roman authorities as Jesus, in his own way, proclaimed his divinity publicly. And his proclamation of that was not that made him special, that made him different from others, but he talked about to the masses, if you will, that it made us all alike, that God connection, that spirit within us is common for everyone. There were, of course, religious and political authorities in the world during his last incarnation that would find that threatening. And with the Romans, it in some ways disobeyed the law. But his intent in claiming and talking about his divinity was not, we need to form a religion, and I, Jesus, need to be the key figure in that religion, and here are the rules and regulations. It was more, we all have the same special connection to the source. We are all spirits inhabiting human bodies, and none of us are more special or have a better connection to God than any others. And we don't need rules, regulations, religious hierarchies in order to use those methods to approach God, and that they are the only method to approach. So all of that was totally out of the scope of his purpose and his message as I understand it.
Okay. And what about the miracles that he's supposed to have performed as well? Even to levitation and the resurrection. Can you make some comments on that for the audience?
Certainly. Jesus talks about, we asked Jesus if in fact he performed what we call miracles, and he said yes, that he did. He discussed at some length in the book that what we call miracles is an application of energy from one human to another human. Obviously, the human on the applying end of that interaction certainly have a certain understanding of how to apply the energy so that what we call healing occurs. But that was certainly some of the ways he chose to identify his connection to God, and that connection was also available to us. You mentioned in the end of that question, Kevin, you spoke of the resurrection. There is a section on the book where Jesus talks about the resurrection, and the question that we asked is, after you were crucified, did you come back to life? And his response was no, that he did not come back to life, that he did not resurrect, that he experienced, if you will, the same thing any of us experience at death, and that is leaving the human body and going back into some other spiritual dimension.
Right, right. I mean, I can imagine in his time, if we put someone like Eckhart Tolle or Neil Donald Walsh or any of the other sort of metaphysical people, or yourself, back in his time, there's a possibility that again, he could have been looked up, those or yourself could be looked up to as highly evolved or Christ-like in a sense.
You're very generous to include me in that company. I, probably wouldn't be worthy of shining their shoes if they wore shoes. But certainly, Jesus was a Middle Eastern peasant. That is the culture into which he reincarnated. And it seems very reasonable, and I certainly personally believe that it would be very easy for people to look up to him, given his presence, given his articulation, given the occasional miracle. It would be very easily for any of us to want to follow him, to attach ourselves to him. And also, we could all understand in that first century religious political environment why the, quote, authorities, end quote, would also be upset about his actions and his words.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, do you think at the time when he incarnated, in a sense, the world needed him? And was it in a pretty dire state? Do you think? Had people lost their connection with Source, in a sense, of who they really and truly were?
Excellent question. I haven't thought about that, but I suspect that for the majority of humans inhabiting the earth at any particular time, they struggle with source connection or a connection to God, understanding that, making sense of that, especially if, as there seems to has always been in history, if there are already some types of organized concept about who God is and how do you approach the divine, that especially for such a vast population of really destitute peasants, people who were slaves, people who had been conquered, who had no rights whatsoever, people who lived from day to day in such a basic sense that we couldn't understand. I'm sure his message was very meaningful to them, and that they were a ripe audience for what he had to say.
Okay, well, we're just going to take a quick break there, so stay tuned and we'll be right back.
The Moore Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines. Available for download on all major digital platforms.
Visit themoreshow.co.uk/shop to purchase products and services from your favourite past guests. If you're new to this site, you can also catch up on the previous television and radio shows through YouTube and the Moore Show website.
The Moore Show is in partnership with Ozark Mountain Publishing, taking readers beyond the unexplained.
Welcome back to the show. I'm currently joined by my guest, Henry Michaelson, author of the book And Jesus Said. Henry, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Now, just before the ad break there, I was going to ask you as well, what do you think they've left out of mainstream Christian religion then, as far as Jesus is concerned?
You're asking my personal opinion.
Well,
I think it's more of what's been put in rather than what's been left out.
Right.
And unfortunately, for those who embrace Orthodox Christianity, my interaction with Jesus leads me to believe, my experience is that he said that the basic tenets of Orthodox Christianity are in fact not true. And the basis for that is that we are all spirits inhabiting a human body, and that we all are connected to God, connected to the source in a way that can't be altered or changed, that we all have equal standing, if you will, with the source, that we are all, our origin was in the source, and we all share that in common with Jesus, with Einstein, with the two of us. It's our commonality. So that no go-between is needed between us and God, or us and the source, because we have this irreparable, undamaged, ever-existing connection to the source in a physical existence, because we elected to incarnate into the bodies we're in now. Obviously, that's not always acutely aware to us. Part of that is because our purpose for being here, for different reasons, but our purposes are to experience physical existence, and to be who we are in that existence. But we don't need, from a religious perspective, we don't need a go-between because of something that we have done that makes us repugnant to God. That was foreign to Jesus, in my opinion. So we don't need a savior. In the ancient system of animal sacrifice, and even in some cases human sacrifice, God is not angry with us, and we don't need to kill something and have it bleed and die in order to appease God, so that then suddenly God changes his mind and accepts us. As I speak the words, at least, and hear them, they sound absurd. And they were absurd to Jesus. We don't need a hierarchy. We don't need another human being to interact on our behalf with God. We don't need someone to die so that God is happy and feels that some price has been paid. So those are all parts of traditional Christianity, and in a variety of ways can be found in a lot of other religions other than Christianity. It's Jesus, I think, wanted to guide us away from that and guide us more into being responsible and maintaining our personal relationship with the source responsibly. I might add that in the book, when we ask him, well, do you want to discard religion altogether?
Yeah.
And do you want to discard the books of religion? And since we're talking about Christianity here, do you want to discard the Bible? And Jesus surprisingly said, no, there's there's good that people can find there. There are people who can connect to the source and do it in a building that we call a church, a cathedral, a temple, a synagogue, etc. If that works for you, if that assists you in your connection to the source, use it. There are accuracies and inaccuracies in the Bible. Read it with that in mind. There's certainly a lot of positive things written in all religions' holy scriptures. So it was as if he was saying, you don't have to throw the baby out with the dirty water, and also be responsible. Don't abdicate your responsibility to someone else.
Yeah.
But be responsible, take what you like, take what you find useful, use it, and if you want to walk that path on your own without the assistance or guidance of any traditional religious background, that's acceptable as well.
Yeah, I mean, I find it a very noble book from what I've read. But I think for myself to say that it's the only truth, truth for me comes from my own makeup of what I want to see as truth, and what feels right as well. Yes, so Michael, you don't believe, and from the the sessions that you've had with Jesus, that we come from sin. Is that more fear-based? Would you say?
What are you saying is the classical religious approach that we have all sinned? Is that more fear-based?
Yes.
I think it is fear-based. Jesus talks about how organizations like religions are formed, that people vie for positions of authority within those groups, and to not accept or embrace that particular religion and its tenets can be threatening to the authorities. It threatens their livelihood, it threatens their control, and therefore they have some reasons to want to discourage anyone from questioning the rules and regulations and set beliefs of that particular religious system. And certainly Jesus talks about, oddly enough, when he talks about that, he then turns the light on us to say that we have a part in that if someone wants to control us, we have to agree to let that occur. If someone wants to convince us that their thoughts, their rules and regulations are what we should adopt, we have to make the decision to adopt those rules and regulations in that belief system. So I almost sense that Jesus is saying, regardless of what people who are in control think and say, you still have a choice to believe them or not, to agree with them or not. And perhaps it's easier in some parts of our world right now to disagree, but we all know that there are sections of our current world where to disagree with authority, especially religious and political authority, can result in physical harm. So here I sit in the United States in 2014 in a society and a structure that gives me the freedom to choose what I will believe. But there are people for whom that choice is more challenging and more difficult. And I think in Jesus' time, he recognized that as well, and that perhaps the choices weren't as easy to accept and weren't as easily accepted by those in authority. But that's, again, back to an earlier statement, my impression is that Jesus would look at current religion, and one of the things he might fairly quickly try to say to us is, what's missing is your recognition and admission of your own responsibility in your own ability to make choices.
Yes. I mean, it begs the question then, why does a soul choose to live in a country where and in a family where they won't be able to think outside the box or watch content like this or even give it any consideration? Is that soul learning a lesson perhaps of giving away its power and being told what to think and say?
Yes, and it's understandable. We all have had our own personal struggles in that area. Some might be less challenging than others, and I think Jesus recognized and still embraces the concept or the idea that he understands that it can be a difficult choice, a challenging choice to say something as simple as, I want to think about this. I want to read more about this. In addition, Kevin, this is not science we're discussing. This is belief, and particularly this part of the conversation is religion. Science is true for everyone. The earth rotates around the sun. That's true for every living human being on the face of the earth. But our conversations about what did Jesus say, what did Jesus mean, even, wait a minute, can someone really close their eyes and go into a trance and talk to Jesus or talk to any other disincarnate being? Is that really possible? How do you prove that? How do you validate that? We've slipped from science into belief, into faith. So it somewhat can cloud the issue and make it more challenging for people to embrace, to think about, to entertain, because it's not science, 1 + 1 is 2, but it's religion. Are the Catholics correct? Is the Church of England correct? Are the Southern Baptists correct? Are Buddhists correct? Or Muslims correct? And leaders from all those groups and any other religious faith would be tempted to say, yes, we're correct. This is the truth, and our book is the truth. And I think part of what Jesus revealed in this conversation, this groups of conversations that I had with him, is that it's not that clear cut, and that it's okay for all of us to believe and embrace whatever we want, but make sure that we accept the responsibility that that's what we're doing.
Okay, well, we're just going to take a quick break there, so stay tuned and we'll be right back.
The Moore Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines. Available for download on all major digital platforms.
If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The Moore Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.
The Moore Show is in partnership with Ozark Mountain Publishing, taking readers beyond the unexplained.
Welcome back to the show. I'm still joined with my guest, Henry Michaelson. Henry, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Now, Henry, are you still in contact or in communication with Jesus?
Yes, and I would hasten to say that I certainly don't entertain the idea that Jesus, as it were, sits around and just waits for me to ring the phone so that he and I can chat. But so far, I have been very fortunate that the times that I have asked him to appear in my mind, that he has agreed to. Sometimes he appears privately. On occasions, I do channelings for groups of people. And so far, I've been very fortunate that he has always appeared.
What do you think of people who have experiences where, you know, they meet Jesus and it changes them in a sense, and you know, they feel that you know, that therefore they follow the sort of Christ teachings. What do you think these experiences are meant for?
Now, are you asking me if I think the experiencers are valid for those people?
Well, yes, valid, and also the reasons behind them, do you think?
For me, that's such a difficult question because, as I stated earlier, my personal belief is that we're not dealing with the area of science. We're dealing with a different area. And if someone challenges me and you say, and that person would say to me, do you expect me to believe that you really channel Jesus and interact with Jesus and Jesus speaks through you? My first answer is, no, I don't expect you to believe that. I'm only reporting my experiences. I embrace your right to think I'm as crazy as a loon, or that I'm misguided, or that I'm fabricating all this for some personal reason. But I certainly don't expect anyone to believe it or necessarily understand it just because it's my experience. And I would feel the same way about someone else. There are plenty of other people who claim to channel Jesus. And who am I to question their personal experience, whether it's valid or not? It would be interesting if there's a way to collate all the data that people have ever spoken that they claim came from Jesus, to look at it and evaluate it for commonalities and contradictions. That might be an interesting discipline. But to your question, Kevin, if someone else claims they've had experiences with Jesus, I can't question that or doubt that whatsoever. I can only accept their statement.
Yeah. So if we want to find our connection back with the source, in a sense, back with the spirit world, we don't have to go through Jesus, in a sense. We all have God within. We all have the ability to connect back to source.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we're all, I mean, it's been said before, and I forgot in my university days, the famous French monk and philosopher, but he said something to the effect that we are not humans trying to be spiritual. We are spiritual entities trying to be human. We are all as capable as Jesus or Buddha or name any other revered person, by revered in the sense that some religious group reveres this person. We all stand on equal ground. We all have the same wiring, if you will, the same capability to interact with the source, connect with the source. And if we can find guidance and assistance along the way from other persons, other entities, fine, but it's still our responsibility to trod that path in our own form, in our own style, as best we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And what are some of the sort of Christ-like qualities that we can take on? What message would he want to give us today to say on the principles that he had, and then some that we can embrace to raise our soul level in a sense?
Well, that's a heavy question, Kevin. From my interaction with Jesus, I think his response is, we all have the right and the responsibility to approach this being spirit, this understanding our connectedness to the source. We all have the right, privilege, and responsibility to approach it differently. That his way was one way, that there are other ways, and that way, if you will, to use that word, is also conditioned by why we're here in the first place. That we have chosen to reincarnate from a non-physical world into a physical world for a variety of reasons and a variety of purposes. And the imagination cannot embrace all those possibilities. So that I think there's some strong likelihood that Jesus might say, don't look at me in the way I did it. Look internally and do it in your own way. Discover what that is. Take the grandness out of it and give it a sense of ordinariness, because in fact it really is. But also embrace the fact that we are humans here to be, well, we're spirit beings here to be human, to pet the puppy, smell the rose, interact with other human beings, feel the wind against our face. So some of what we think is grand is really quite simple, everyday experiences that we bypass as we scurry about to make a living, pay our bills, interact with other people, live up to responsibilities that we've created. So I'm not trying to dodge your question, but I sense that perhaps Jesus might not say, adopt some of the qualities I had, but rather apply your own, discover what those are within a wide sense of boundaries. Do you think at all I've spoken to your question, or did I miss it? Do I need to readdress it?
No, you answered that perfectly, and thank you for that answer as well. I speak a lot on this show about oneness and about co-creatorship and about we are all connected, and what we do to another, we do to ourselves. And, being spiritual is not a case of ignoring suffering neither. My question is moving towards, we sort of create the reality we're born into, in a sense, if we accept that we are a soul here, that we've chosen to be here. And I think we have a duty to give back in this life on some form, would you say?
Yes, that is so well said, Kevin. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, another question I've got for you as well is, why do some of us feel disconnected from the source? Why does that take place?
Well, I think it it begins with the lack of knowledge that we are connected in the first place. There are plenty of us walking the face of the earth who, for a variety of reasons, never give source connection or the connection to the divine a second thought. It's easy for us to certainly recognize that there are people in some cultures who are living because of the culture and the country they live in and the times they live in. They're probably living from hand to mouth, from day to day, in a way that we just can't understand because we've never experienced it. But that can certainly make it challenging to even think about the divine when we fear for our lives every day, or we wonder if we're going to have enough food to eat the next day. And in some cases, I think some of us probably have incarnated to have those types of experiences, and that's okay. And by okay, I don't mean that kind of life that I'm describing is okay. I mean, from my perspective, it's okay with the divine, that God understands that the reason we incarnated was to have human experiences in a physical dimension, and that if the divine connection, if you will, takes a back seat to that, that's acceptable, because that divine connection can never be harmed, can never be separated, can never be disconnected, regardless of, as humans, what our awareness is. So I think some of us come in to have such all-encompassing physical experiences that the connection to the divine is never considered or rarely considered. And yet it's always present. It doesn't require our belief, our remembrance, or our knowledge for that connection to exist and for it to be there. Sometimes it can exist outside of our awareness. These issues, thinking about these issues, exploring these issues in any way that we can, we've adopted a different path, but it doesn't place us higher on some hierarchy of humanity.
No, absolutely not. I am no higher than anybody. I am an equal. Just because I've remembered my connection to Source. Well, we're all going to get there one day. But in your opinion, then, what are some of the benefits of looking at this work and connecting back with Source and living a life, from that space?
Well, I can only speak for me personally, that discovering the ability to experience other dimensions while being in this dimension, to interact with non-physical beings while being in a physical body, in a physical realm, it's indescribable. I just can't think of any words that could describe the pleasure, the contentment that I receive from doing that. I can't remember who said, after enlightenment, you still have to take out the trash. But I didn't say it, someone else did. But, even as many times as I enjoy leaving the physical plane, however I might stumble through the English language to try to describe that, I still have to take out the trash. I still have to brush my teeth if I want to keep them. I still have to change clothes so that I'm acceptable in polite society, et cetera, et cetera. So there's that blend that has to take place. But for me, it's led to accepting who I am, accepting my strengths and my weaknesses, and just embracing those, addressing and trying to change some of those as I can, occasionally seeking professional help to do that. That for me is all tied up in my recognition of my source connection. And my path has been from orthodoxy to the opposite, the extreme opposite of orthodox religion.
Yeah.
But, it was part of my path. It's part of why I'm here. It's part of what I came to do.
Of course.
At least that's my belief.
Yeah.
And that's what I've embraced.
I mean, do you think we all carry the Christ consciousness within us?
My answer would depend on what you mean by the Christ consciousness. But if you mean, do we all carry the sense of divinity, the
Yes.
ability to recognize our divinity and the divinity in others, then yes, some of us have to explore that, and if I could use the word work a little more at recognizing that Christ consciousness. Some of us seem to come at it more naturally, but that's true in all of life. Some people seem to come at academic pursuits more easily than others of us. Some of us tend to relate to music and be able to display musical talent more easily than others, et cetera, et cetera. But certainly the Christ consciousness, as we have described it, is present in all of us.
And Henry, what would you say is the most important message in the book that Jesus would want to give to us nowadays?
Responsibly love yourself. Because inevitably when you do that work, it blossoms into loving and accepting others. If we skip the first step of doing that work for ourselves, with ourselves, it to some degree impedes our ability to accept and love others and to extend to others the very things we want ourselves.
Okay. And where can we get your book from as well? And what's your website?
The website is and-jesus-said.com. The book can be purchased on Amazon. Either you can search for Henry Michaelson or And Jesus Said, and it's easy to find on Amazon. A lot of people now, including myself, prefer the electronic copy, and there is an electronic copy if you now use that method for reading. And if I could, if you want to contact me personally, I would be very happy to interact with any of your listeners, and I can be found at henrymichaelson@yahoo.com.
Well, Henry Michaelson, thank you so much for joining us today. It really has been a fascinating interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kevin. The pleasure's been mine. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we've come to an end on today's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on The More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests on the show via themoreshow.co.uk, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on the show. So until next time, Be safe.